Well, perhaps if I was part of Hezbollah, I would have due reason to worry, because it's not only their walkie-talkies that have been blowing up. Solar-controlled stuff has gone up. Radios, walkie-talkies, pagers. I mean, what is going on here? How's it been done? I think this is an absolute coup of statecraft. Let's get the opinion now of Will Geddes, security expert. Will, I mean, you basically are the closest thing in this country we get to James Bond, and the sort of stuff that we've seen taking place is almost like Ian Fleming himself could have written it.
I know, it's hi Alex, it's quite astounding. I mean, to be honest, we're all aghast, we're all sat back, we're looking at how this operation was done, how cleverly it was done, and this has obviously been in the planning for a considerable amount of time. And some of the theories which are circulating do make me chuckle a little bit about how people are thinking it was done, when really one has to look at one commonality with all of these devices, and that simple thing is lithium batteries.
So, I mean, lithium batteries, yes, but they needed to be rigged up to receive a certain code. There needed to be surely some sort of TNT or explosive in there to create the big kaboom. Then apparently a switch would need to be put inside to be able to set these devices off. And the big question is, at what point during the chain of where they were originally manufactured, when they were then distributed, so you go from, is it Japan or Taiwan to Hungary and then to Hezbollah themselves, at what point in the chain were thousands of these things, you know, at the mercy of Mossad to put bits and bobs in them to then coordinate this?
Absolutely. And I mean, and again, you cover that very beautifully and succinctly in your description of what actually took place. Now, let's break it down a little bit. Now, these particular pages, which was that first wave of attacks, and we've seen since then walkie-talkies or handheld radios have been the next, solar panels, laptops, various other devices which are lithium controlled have detonated. But a lot of these explosions have been quite small and measured against the size of the lithium battery inside. Now, let's take your theory of these devices being intercepted before they got into the hands of members of Hezbollah. Now, to try and put a charge within a device like a pager, very, very difficult. You're not old enough to remember pagers, I'm sure, Alex, but I had one in the 90s. They're very small, and the vast majority are controlled or powered by a AA battery. Now, within the actual unit itself, and I've spoken to people far, far cleverer than me who do these kinds of operations since this happened a couple of days ago, and they've said, Will, it would be very, very difficult to not only intercept the device itself, put that charge inside it, put in a detonator, and then run that operation and make sure they got into the hands of the Hezbollah. In fact, the best way to look at this is by reverse engineering. Look at who the actual devices were targeted at. Now, this comes from ground intelligence, which had been gathered as to who these individuals were. Now, we know they were carrying pagers because Hezbollah leadership had turned around and said, we're not safe using mobile phones. And the simple reason for that is that Israel has some incredible cyber offense and defense capabilities. And tracking a mobile phone, as we see in the movies, as we see on the TV, and I can tell you from day-to-day experience, is a heck of a lot easier with cell site locations. So what they did was they determined who those devices belonged to, what those pager numbers and who they belonged to. The solar panels, and those would have been obviously, again, identified from ground reconnaissance. That would have been human intelligence, as we call it. Likewise, the radios, the make, the model. The radios were icon radios. So what they used, and it's been very, very sophisticated, and again, this is speculation on my part, was a malicious piece of code which transmitted to those devices because they're all receiving devices. Even a solar panel is a receiving device. And again, it goes to this whole Internet of Things, all of our lives being wired up by various different technology. They can receive a signal. And if the signal is sent in a particular fashion, that code can then overheat the battery into what is an explosion. And I would offer to any of the viewers and listeners, go on YouTube, have a look at lithium devices, even e-cigarettes, and just see the small explosion that happens when they overheat, usually when people least expect it.
I mean, the worrying thing about what you say there is if it doesn't necessarily need to be intercepted to have extra widgets put inside it, but some sort of careful interception and coding is enough to make things explode, then anyone anywhere right now in any country with malign intent could be trying to do the same to anybody else's bits and bobs. That's quite alarming.
Absolutely, it is. And it's not the first time it's happened. You know, we've seen operations in the past, excuse me, assassinations, where individuals more often have had what we call the old analog phones, you know, the old brick phones that we used to carry before we had the ability to communicate and control our entire lives within them. And they would put a small charge in those because, again, you had the real estate in those phones to be able to do so. They would call the target would pick up the phone, confirming it was them, and they would detonate, and obviously that would kill their intended target. So this escalation, this evolution to a more cyber communicated distribution of threat is exceptionally worrying because it could, in theory, target pretty much anybody who has some lithium controlled device in their possession.
I'm just pushing my phone quite far away from me right now, just in case.
You, me both.
Yeah. I mean, this is potentially going to therefore change the course of history and the way we do things. Maybe it's the end of lithium batteries and that'll put China back in their box. But what is quite exceptional about this in some respects is the fact that the strategy that Israel has deployed has really melted the command and communicate system of Hezbollah. It seems to me now they haven't got their little devices to coordinate on, and whatever their response is going to be, they must already assume that Israel knows or could intercept that somehow. It's going to really debilitate their ability to coordinate a response. But also it shows the world on the world stage that they have surgically managed to target the terrorists. Yes, there's been collateral damage, and that is, you know, I don't think we should downplay the fact that there have been children among fatalities. But by and large, what it did by basically taking over control of something which is exclusively possessed by the terrorists is it shows we haven't dropped missiles on Lebanon. We have gone after the very people who would come after us. And I think that that's been quite an exceptional bit of statecraft. How do you think Lebanon are likely to now respond? We understand possibly that Israel could be flying planes over the southern territory of that country as we speak.
Well, again, it's about surgical and precision striking, Alex. I mean, to cover quite a few of the points that you just mentioned, let's start off with the actual targeting. Now, I've been to Beirut, I've been to Lebanon a number of times, and I count some very, very dear close friends as Lebanese. None of them are particularly fans of Hezbollah. Now, yes, there is collateral damage, but the striking at smaller devices like pagers would minimize the amount of damage. And that's not to say people won't get harmed and people haven't been harmed. People have been harmed. But it's far more strategic than necessarily going straight through with missiles or targeted explosives into particular areas other than on a much smaller basis. So you think of the pager, let's go back to that for a minute. Most people will carry a pager either on their hip or on their chest pocket. And when that detonates, the small lithium battery, that's either going to potentially target the heart in terms of the damage, or if it's on the hip, the femoral artery. So again, it's localized to the individual. And yes, there could be second-degree burns that people might suffer if they're within or close proximity to someone when it happens. But going to the key point of what Israel's achieved with this is to basically dismantle Hezbollah's ability to communicate with each other. It also brings them out together. So in terms of actually, again, being more precision in their targeting, they will have to have face-to-face meetings unless they're intending to send pigeons to each other to communicate various messages. So it works very, very well on a psychological operational level as well. And in fact, although many people may not see this, they could see this as an antagonization to a retribution by Hezbollah. In fact, I think it could do the entire opposite. And it could actually turn them around to saying, right, we better lay low for the time being, because almost it's a case of IDF could hit us or Israel could hit us whenever they so please.
Well, let's hope. I think it was a very clever strategy, and I do hope that that is the outcome. Well, it's been fascinating talking to you, and I really am I don't want to touch that thing now, my mobile phone. You know, at one point we thought it was going to microwave our brains if we slept next to it and got over that. Now I'm worried that Putin's going to blow it up while I'm on the tube. Right, going to take a short break now.